The UDRcast is not affiliated and does not represent any 12-step fellowship. I, Bill Ward, the host of the UDRcast, will be sharing my experience and my journey of recovery. That does include, but is not limited to, the literature contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps. Our guests will be sharing their own path to recovery and what has worked for them. The UDRcast encourages and supports all paths to recovery. Welcome everybody to the UDRcast. UDR stands for Uncover, Discover, and Recover. My name is Bill Ward, and I'm coming to you from the recovery capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. Here we are going to discuss everything recovery, different perspectives, different experiences, both with the people I know and with others from around the world. If you resonate with anything you've heard on this episode today, we ask that you share it with anyone who you think may benefit from it. If you have any questions or comments, please find us at BILLWARDLIFE and send us a message in the info section. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you are interested in more recovery content, you can find the buttons for the YouTube channel and other social media outlets on the homepage, and you will be redirected to those platforms. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time. Welcome everybody. Bill Ward here again with a good friend of mine, Tyler P. A guy that I've met in recovery. Met him a few years ago. Didn't really connect. You know, he's been back around for a while. You know, and every now and then you see somebody that you just can't help but notice, right? And I've been watching him grow over the last year and a half into the 2-year mark here. And there's something really different about him. And I'm just really honored to have Tyler come in and, you know, share his experience through recovery and, you know, what not to do and what to do. So just want to say welcome. Thanks for joining me today, Tyler.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I'm absolutely honored to be here. I know we've been trying to get together for this for a little while. And yeah, I'm excited, man. I see what you're doing with this. You know, I'm a huge fan of the podcast and the work that you're doing, and, you know, for our journeys to come together so that I can actually potentially contribute something to this is actually quite flattering, right? And even the words that you just spoke there, you know, it makes me pretty humble and honored to be walking this path with you and the men that you work with, the men that we work with. It's truly a reward.
Right on, brother. Right on. Just a few intro for the listeners. Where are you from, bro? And what's your sober date?
So I am born and raised in Calgary, Alberta, the recovery capital of Canada. And yeah, no. So I've been sober since September 4th, 2020. And actually, sorry, let me correct that. I've been in recovery since September 4th, 2020. I use sobriety and recovery very specifically when I'm talking about this stuff, because I've had several years of sobriety previous to this, and probably not a day of recovery in any of those years. And there's a massive difference in my life today because of the recovery that I'm able to experience.
And for our listeners, quickly before we get right into the podcast and the interview here, how do you define the difference between sobriety and recovery? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are listening that don't really, or they want an explanation of that. And could you give us one?
Yeah. So sobriety is easy. I woke up this morning sober, right? I don't have drugs and alcohol in my system. That's easy. I can wake up like that any day of the week. What do I do with that after is really where the recovery comes in. So for me, you know, in those long stretches and brief intervals of sobriety where I wasn't putting drugs and alcohol in my system, it made me sicker. And that's the base level of sobriety is the abstinence of that, which doesn't offer me any of the promises that are outlined in the book. It doesn't offer me the life that I have today. It actually made my life substantially worse, right? I remember at one point I was just over a year sober, just doing it on my own, refusing, to listen to any of the suggestions that I knew that I'd heard previously. And I wanted to take my own life, Why? Like outwardly, materialistically, my life was going well. But I was miserable. I was rotten on the inside because I hadn't done any of the work that's required for actual recovery, where I can be free from that. I can be present. I can connect with my spirit. I can, help other people and truly be of service, like in the altruistic way, not in the self-advancing way of, what am I going to get out of this? And today, that inner peace that's talked about, I thought it was a joke before, and that is actually what recovery is. And the reward of being present, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, wherever my body is where all those other things follow today. I'm not having the anxiety about what's going to come tomorrow, or, the regret of the past, because I came to terms with my past, and I'm not afraid that it's going to happen again. And that's where I suffered before, was I was just living in this state of constant anxiety and depression, because I hadn't done anything to come to terms with my past, to really, work through it, make amends, do any of that stuff that's suggested to us in the program. And because of that, I was terrified that it was going to happen again, because it constantly happened again. Time and time again, I proved to myself that no matter what, no matter how much I wanted to stay sober, I was going to burn it all down again. Through experience, I knew that was going to happen. So how could I not be so anxiety riddled about the future? Because I knew I was going to hurt all those people again. I knew I was going to push those people away. I was going to burn everything down. And today, in actual recovery, those fears don't exist in me,
So you bring up a good point that I'd like to touch on before we kind of backtrack into your story. I often say, it's the fear of using and going back to the old life that'll motivate us and keep us going. But the problem is most people don't keep the program going, and they get on, like you alluded to the business of being self-satisfied. They go back into the world and just go take for them, and nothing's really changed other than they got some free time from themselves, and they started feeling better, and they think because we feel better, we think we're better. But just because we feel better doesn't mean we're better, right? I have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of the spiritual condition. So the thing is like, as we work this program in its entirety, the fear of using isn't motivating you today. And there's been a definite shift, and it's actually the God dope or love and the feelings that actually keep pulling us. And as you've worked, put the practical application of what we're actually doing here, the results are the results, and you recoil as from a hot flame, not just from alcohol, but from a lot of the defective character, right? Which is really the reason why we drink. We're not drinking for any other reason that we're trying to medicate, that spiritual malady. So I'm really happy you said that. So let's kind of take a walk back into Tyler's life. We chatted the other day on the phone, right? And I had said, fuck, I wish we had this on audio, man. This would have been such a good interview as we spoke on the phone, but that's not the way life works, right? And that's happened numerous times with my friends in recovery. But let's take a walk back in your life, bro. Wherever you want to start, it's totally up to you, but did you notice anything as a kid with the spiritual malady, or was everything pretty good? Like, how did you grow up?
Yeah, so I'm pretty textbook, from all the stories and speakers that I've heard speaking about their journeys through addiction, alcoholism, whatever they struggled with. At a very young age, right? I can see a lot of differences now after having done a lot of the work on myself and with the program, as to where those things actually came from, like where their roots were. But in the moment, I never did any self-reflecting. I never did any, why do I feel this way? I just knew I felt different and I didn't like it. And the first time I drank was the day of my 10th birthday party. So my older brother, he's 6 years older than me, and I was 10 years old. So they're, 16, 17-year-old guys. And these were the guys I looked up to. And they had everything that I thought I wanted, right? Like, these were the coolest guys, you know, they were gangsters, they were doing gangster shit. And I thought that's what it was supposed to be like. So I looked up to them. And then the morning of my 10th birthday, they had partied the night before. So there was still some booze left over in the house, and, you know, a few of them there. And they thought it was funny to challenge me to, you know, drink a 40 of OE. And I because I wanted to be like them so bad, I was like, oh, you want me to drink this? Watch me chug the whole fucking thing. So I downed a 40 of beer at 10 years old, the day of my birthday party. And I remember seeing the look in their eyes in that moment where they were like, holy shit. And I was like, I want that. I think I became as addicted to that validation that I saw in them in that moment. And again, this is something that I've learned through looking back. I didn't recognize it at the time. I didn't know. I just knew I liked the way it made me feel, both the booze and the recognition from these guys that I looked up to. And I chased that. I chased that up until I found recovery, you know, in all different forms. So not knowing why, but knowing that I wanted that, I did some pretty harmful shit for the next 20 or so years, you know. Actually, even longer than that. I think it was just rocketed with the introduction of drugs to that desire to fill that hole inside of me, and not knowing what it was, and never even pausing to think, you know, is this making me happy? Is this healthy? Is this what I even fucking want? I just wanted that feeling that I got from it. So, I mean, it's my 10th birthday. I'm in the shower. I'm blacked out drunk, you know, and I didn't see anything wrong with it because I liked the way it made me feel. So I pursued that for years to come, you know, and all throughout school from that point on, you know, I hung out with, you know, some pretty hardcore guys, and we were doing some pretty hardcore shit, and, you know, thinking that we were badass, and, you know, trying to prove it. The biggest thing was trying to prove it for me. I wanted you to see the person I wanted to be, and I needed you to know that that's who I was. So if it was drinking, I could drink more than you. If it was doing drugs, I could do more drugs than you. If it was fighting, I could fight more guys than you. I could be tougher than you. You know, if it was women, I'd be the guy trying to fuck the hottest girl at every party, and then I would do it. And I was like, did you see that? Is everybody paying attention to me? Look how good I'm doing over here. And these things were not any actual good to me. They didn't serve me in any healthy way. But I got the validation from those things, so I pursued them. You know, and even through high school, like, I got into acting and stuff. And again, this is stuff that I can see looking back and understanding how the actual disease affected my self-esteem, my ego, you know, how my defects of character developed through necessity in trying to pursue these things. I couldn't see it at the time. But I mean, I could go on stage in front of, you know, hundreds of people and perform a play because I was into acting, you know, because I was a character. I couldn't sit in a room with another fucking person and talk about the way I felt. There was not a chance you were going to get me to do that. But I could put on a mask and get in front of a crowd and be anybody I wanted to be.
So you bring up a good point here. You know, right from being a kid, you have the disease of validation. Right. And I've done numerous step 5s. You know, I think the biggest thing that I've seen in the step 5s that I've done is the person has not been able to be who they're truly meant to be. They're always trying to be who they're supposed to be. And that gratification that we get from other people validating, you know, you chugging that big bottle of booze. And how that just made you feel like proud, right? And then that kind of sinks into that subconscious, and then it manifests itself into all these other areas of our life. What ends up happening is we spend our whole lives being, like our literature says, the actor, trying to live up to what the world tells us. And a lot of these behaviors and the actor mentality comes from the societal belief systems that we don't even really have a choice. We're just born into it, right? And if we can't live up to some of these bars, like of, you know, getting the hot woman or getting the good job, or, you know, maybe when we're younger, you know, getting the good grades and getting the good marks. And I think school really actually does a lot of negative things for people because it sets these bars that kids are supposed to obtain. And kids that are artists or kids that are musicians, kids that have a different way of living, they're kind of ostracized because they're not able to, you know, have the 80s and 90s that these other kids have that are total intellectuals, so they feel ostracized and they feel shameful. And, a lot of that I've seen through these step fives too. So, I'm really happy that you brought that up. So as we kind of get into these teenage years, how did alcohol and drugs and validation and your defects, what is the next, what did you see going on as you get older?
So, I was pursuing all this stuff blindly and just trying to, follow whatever was self-satisfying in the moment. And then, kind of in my later teen years was when I tried cocaine for the first time. And that was a massive piece where it was like, oh my, I thought I felt powerful in the shit I was doing before. Give me a couple lines of cocaine and watch how powerful I actually become, right? I was the life of the party, again, fighting, women, all of these things that I thought I wanted to do. I would do them to the extreme with the introduction of cocaine. And in true addict fashion, I thought, okay, well, the best way to, keep living this life is to start selling drugs and start living that life. And, and it also it fed into that feeling of validation I got from other people where I wanted people to fear me. I wanted them to respect me, and they never respected me. They'd be nice to my face and they would give me the response I was chasing, but that wasn't actual respect. That I see that now and I'm like, oh, gross. Like that was nothing even close to respect. So I'm out there, selling drugs, just trying to live this life. And I wasn't very good at it because I did so fucking much of them. But I remember there was this one guy that would come by my house, at like 3 a.m, and he'd be trying to sell me a DVD player or whatever for a couple of hits of crack, like a half gram or whatever. And I was like, gross, like what a piece of shit this guy is. I would never do that. That would never be me. And it was like, yeah, just wait, buddy. You're on a downward spiral that's gonna take you places you never thought you could go. But I always tried to see the outcome in all these situations. So I tried to control my behavior based on what I wanted for an outcome, which is just, self-will run riot. I know now. And so I pursued it, right? And I mean, my disease just propelled with the introduction of drugs where, it just got worse and worse and worse so quick. And I lost so many things, and I carried that into my adult life, my early adult life, until it got to the point where my behavior was really affecting other people. Like I was fucked for sure, but I was really affecting other people. So that's when I got, the frothy emotional appeal of everybody around me being like, dude, can you fucking smarten up, please? Like, what do you got to do to get better here? Because we see you burning your life to the ground and it's killing us. And I was like, okay, again, for validation, I was like, I'll go get some help for you, not for me, but to get you off my back. I never wanted to be free from the disease. I couldn't even admit that I had the disease. What I wanted to be free from was the repercussions of the disease, of having those people get off my back and just leave me the fuck alone so I could burn my life to the ground, right? And I didn't see it then. I was just like, sure, I'll go do what you're asking me to do. And that's when I got introduced into recovery for the first time, but I was in no place ready to be receptive to that.
How many years ago was that first introduction into recovery?
I think I was about 24, 25 years old at that time.
And how old are you now?
37.
Holy shit. So you bring up another good point that I just love hearing. The circumstantial recovery, like, over the years, my buddy Jesse and I, we compile all the data that we've collected through sponsorship, right? And part of my experience, strength, and hope is sponsorship and collecting that data and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. And Jesse had said this one time, it's like, Bill, it's kind of like we're scientists in a way. And in a way, we are kind of scientists because we're collecting this data and we're microscopically reviewing the data. And it's not because we're doing that on purpose. It's just part of the deal. And over time, you start getting these theories, very similar to the doctor opinion. The theory that these men have an allergy to alcohol, it was a theory to begin with. But it ended up being the basis of the disease being certified by the American Medical Association in 1955. So if that was a theory and it was correct, then some of these other theories through observation, they're, maybe we're not God, so it's not every time, but, pretty good odds that we're pretty much on the track. And one of the things that I think that I'm on the track with, and my buddy Jesse and, other people are kind of tuning into this, is circumstantial recovery, man. Based on circumstances, other people wanting you to get sober, that frothy emotional peel, or you're losing your job, or you're losing the relationship, or your kids, or whatever it is that you feel like you're losing or you're not going to get. And I found that circumstantial recovery has a shelf life of, maybe 8 months to 2 years, because they haven't had that deep level concession of step one, where the gates of hell closed on them with a clang, and ultimately the spiritual malady will drive that obsession again, because nothing's really changed, right? So I'm really, really happy that you brought that up, and so let's keep going, bro.
Well, and I just when you're talking about, like you guys compiling data, and this being a theory, and then through practical experience, you're starting to see this stuff, and like that whole scientific relationship with recovery, which is a spiritual disease, as well as a mental obsession, as well as the allergy to the body. And I mean, the prophecy from when the book was written until now, with that divine intervention back then, saying that this is an allergy of the body, and even, the doctor saying, hey, we recognize that there's something different about the alcoholic body. And then, neuroscience advances, 70 years, and then they find out like the TIQs and all this stuff, and how we do actually react on a neurological level different than other people. It's like, as if that wasn't God working back then, right? The science wasn't caught up to it. And I mean, I look at recovery when it comes to working with others, I look at it today very similarly to, a doctor or scientific relationship, where it's like, okay, you learn this stuff, right? So the educational tools are in the big book, right? They're in the books, not on the walls, not in the meetings. They're in the book. So what do? You sit down and you study it. Well, that's the same as a doctor going to university. What happens after they go to university? Well, then they got to go into a residency, which is like a sponsorship, right? So they're working with another person that's done exactly what they're doing before them. So that's the residency. And then what happens when you complete the residency? Well, then you get to go be a doctor, and you get to go help people on your own through the experiences that have brought you up here. So it's the educational portion, it's the residency, the sponsorship portion, and then it's going and helping other people. And then the beautiful thing about a doctor practicing medicine or whatever field it is then they get to be the resident, right? And then they get to take other people coming behind them through this. So when you relate it to like practical experience and knowledge and the data that you guys have compiled, and you do it in a very conscious way. You're like, we're looking at the data. We're going to see the similarities through these guys that we're working with. And the similarities are fucking glaring, right? Like how many times can you go out there and see what these guys are doing and predict the outcome? It's not because you think you're fucking smarter than them, or you want to be in control of I told you so when they come back after burning their life to the ground again. It's because it's what's happened time and time again. And I'm a cautionary tale to that. We were just talking about this, how when I listen to the podcasts and especially when you and Jesse talk so bluntly about it, but you're telling the future because you've seen the past, right? Like, this stuff is going to happen. And I look back at, we kind of varied off my story there at the early stages of introduction to recovery. But I look back at how that played out in my life, and I listen to you guys predicting it today, and I'm like, it's 100% accurate. What you're warning about today is exactly what I went through over a decade ago. Like, verbatim, like it's word for fucking word. And I'm like, you're telling my story as a cautionary tale to these guys that come in and think they got it, right? Because when I got into the program, I didn't see any of that, but my motives were wrong, right? Like you just talked about, that circumstantial recovery was to be free from the consequences. It wasn't to be free from the disease. I couldn't truly concede that I had a disease at that moment. I knew my life was unmanageable to a very real extent. And that was the motivator, right? It was like, how do I manage my life better? How do I get these people off my back? And because that was my motive, because I couldn't truly concede to my innermost self that I suffer from a disease that I can't cure, but I can be free from. And that's the difference, is the hope that comes from, I can be free from this. It's not, it doesn't have to kill me. It doesn't have to end me in jails, institutions, death, all these things, because it is a disease, it's chronic. It's fatal. It would have been fatal for me, for sure. And it just progressed and progressed and progressed,
Do you believe in your early years of recovery that you even understood the illness? Because I know with the data, right? I don't think a lot of people really understand the illness of like step one, basically. They don't understand the malady. They don't understand how the malady drives the obsession, and they don't really understand the powerlessness of once you put it in your bloodstream, into your body, that you're not drinking to escape life anymore. You're drinking or using to overcome a physical craving in your body beyond your mental control. And like once you understand the depth of the illness, that step one ideology, then the gates of hell close on you with a clang, and you get that like, I'm fucked, which is the whole reason why we need step two. And I don't think enough people understand the depth of the step one, so they don't really accept, a real practical applied God in their life. They accept a theoretical God for the most part. So in those early years, where were you at with that understanding of the step one with the components that I just listed?
Yeah, so that was actually, when I look back now, that was why no later steps worked after that point, is because I truly couldn't comprehend. I could kind of relate to a step one, when we look at it from those three different aspects of the disease. I knew I had an obsession, right? Because my mind was going all the time. But I couldn't concede to the fact that it was truly as bad as it was. The spiritual malady, there's not a fucking chance I would have opened up to God, right? I attached to the theory of God, and you and I have had this conversation before, and I love, where we got with it was that the ego attaches to the theory of God. Now, in early recovery, I know today, the theory of God is sufficient. That's how the program's designed, right? Step two is the hope that this is going to work, the hope that you can make this spiritual connection, the hope that you can be free from it. It's not the experiences or the faith born out in experiences of having it actually come to life in your application of it. But I couldn't even hope for it, right? Like there's no way. In the book it says lack of power. That was our dilemma. I went in being like, where do I get my power? Like, give me more of that power. Who do I talk to about getting this power back? And it's like, dude, you give it up. Like, that's the whole problem. You can't you're not responsible enough to have the fucking power. Like, you burn that to the ground. You can't run this show. And I didn't look at it like that. I was like, okay, well, if I get enough of this power back, if I get enough of this manageability back, then it's back to the Tyler show, right? So I couldn't comprehend the spiritual malady of it. No, not a chance. I always knew in my innermost self that there was something greater than me. I had experiences that proved this, right? If I was aware of it, and if I could just accept that, I would have been in a better place. But it had to be experienced through pain enough for me to be beaten down to truly concede that it was a higher power. It was this greater being that I really did know was out there, but I couldn't admit it. And then the allergy, fuck that. I mean, I knew that cocaine, because cocaine in itself is a terrible thing that propels people to do horrible things. So I was like, well, if I'm on the cocaine, then yeah, it's going to make my life unmanageable. I could not, for the longest, until this round of recovery, admit that I was the real deal alcoholic. And that's where my story took a real dark turn in early recovery. Was, I had gone through a treatment center. I had read the book. I chose to sponsor myself, which was just fucking ego all over it. But I'm like, I'm smart enough to get this. Sure. I'm smart enough to read this book and understand it. I'm a literate guy. I can do that. What I couldn't do was live it, right? So I can learn this shit. But then what happens when it's time to apply the shit that I've learned? Now, I hadn't gone through the experiences because I hadn't done the steps properly. I glazed over them. I did a half-ass. I didn't write a step 4. I just knew a step 4. I went and spoke to a Catholic priest who patted me on the back, told me I was a good guy, and go get him, Tiger, and sent me out into the world to, inevitably let my defects of character come back and take over. So I'd never done any of the work, so I couldn't live the experiences. I couldn't gain those principles through experience of doing the work. So then, after a period of sobriety, after rebuilding my life, after getting out of the treatment center, after moving in with my girlfriend, after, getting all this stuff back, getting a better career, getting stuff, all the material, the allergy of the body fucking kicked my ass, because I knew that I knew and I could admit that cocaine was never going to be something I could safely use. But what I couldn't admit was that mind-altering substances was something that I couldn't use. So after rebuilding and showing everybody how good I was doing, I convinced those around me that it was okay for me to have some safe drinks, some controlled drinking. And the first night, with some skepticism from them, we did this, and I had a few drinks, and it went well. That's the shitty part about my disease, is it's cunning, it's baffling, it's powerful, but it's fucking patient. It's going to give me enough rope to hang myself before it comes sneaking in and blindsides me. So in that moment, I had a few drinks that night, and I drank like a gentleman. And then I was like, well, that worked out well. Let's do it again next weekend. And we did, and it worked out well again. And I was like, fuck, guys, look at how good I'm doing. Do you see how well I've got this thing under control? And they were still skeptical, but I couldn't see it. I was convinced. Like, my ego was just like, dude, you are the man at recovery. You found a way to do this that none of those people in the rooms and in those treatment centers could do, because you're smarter, you're better, and you're stronger, and you have more willpower. And then the third weekend, we did it again. I drank so much, I blacked out. I pissed in a closet. I fell down some stairs. I don't remember what happened. And I was like, oh, fuck. How'd that happen? And everybody was like, dude, what the fuck? And I was like, no. We're not going to focus on that weekend. Remember the other 2 weekends where I drank like a gentleman? That's the gold standard now. That's what I can do, so I will do it. No, I couldn't do that because I have an allergy of the body. So no matter what, no matter how much I will it, when those things enter my system, I'm fucked. I'm off to the races. I don't know where I'm going to end up. I don't know where I'm going to end up pissing at the end of the night. Could be in a closet, ruining all my girlfriend's purses and having her be like, are we seriously doing this again? And then over a long enough course of time, the drugs came back in.
So at what stage, so you came in when you were about 24, 25, how many years after that initial introduction to the program did this take place?
So that was, I think I was about just a year to a year and a half of sobriety, not recovery, but sobriety, that kicked in. So it was patient enough to wait that long.
Okay, so you had been working your own program, sponsoring yourself, gaining all the self-knowledge. Like you said, you're kind of an academic and you can understand some things. And, and the highlight in the book, it says this is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, that self-knowledge will not fix this, right? And so you're running on the effective mental defenses, but you're so delusional with the illness and not really understanding it. And it's about no mood or mind altering substances. And you can convince yourself that, yeah, maybe I can have a drink because cocaine was the problem, right? And how many people that are listening to this are like the same way? Like, there's so many people I've met over the years that they're like, well, dude, I'm an alcoholic. I'm not a drug addict. I can probably do some ayahuasca and some acid and some mushrooms and some. No, like you don't get it. Or the opposite, right? Maybe they're a drug addict and they think they can fucking drink. But the thing is no matter what substance goes in the body, the reason why it's going in the body is because I'm medicating the spiritual malady. And just to highlight for the listeners, in our literature, it talks about I'm restless, irritable, discontented, unless I can again experience a sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking the first few drinks or drugs. Once I succumb to the desire again, succumbed means failed to resist. And sometimes we got to be beaten down pretty good by numerous substances to kind of have this shit fucking punch us in the face and go, okay, I get it. And here's where I'm at. So, more good points. Like, you are a textbook. Like you said, you are a textbook addict, alcoholic. And a lot of people do not understand what actually drives this. And then just one more point before I turn the mic back to you. In that same piece of the doctor's opinion, it talks about men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol or drugs. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious. So the sensation, when it used to work to medicate the malady, it's now an elusive sensation, which elusive means you don't really get it the way that you used to get it. But your brain has that that little spot in it that says, I'm going to get it. It's going to work the exact same way that it's always worked. But once you cross the line in your drinking and using career, it doesn't work the same, which is why in the back of the book, it talks about we get to the jumping off point. We can't imagine life with alcohol or drugs or without it. And then we don't know what to do. And then while we admit it is injurious, I know that it's bad for me is what that line means. But I cannot, after time, differentiate the true from the false. And what that is I can't tell that it's bad for me. I only remember what it does for me, not what it does to me. And I have this like delusional ability to say that it's going to be different this time. Or this drug or this drink is going to be different than the last. Or like you just said, you know what? Out of these 3 weeks, yeah, this third week was a shit show. But look at the other 2 weeks. And your friends are looking at you like, are you fucking crazy, Tyler? Like, are you actually crazy? And the real insanity that we talk about in step 2 is I have an insane idea to think that this drink, knowing what always has happened, that it's going to be different this time. And I put it in my body, stone cold sober. Whatever the precise definition of the word insanity may be, we call this plain insanity. And that's why we need God or Creator to begin with, right? But the real insanity, once we stay sober, is me running my own life. And if I keep running my own life, I will pick up the drink again. So turning the mic back over to you. So when your family was watching you, your friends and family, make these like insane excuses and try to fucking sell them on this, like, cause you're the salesman, right? They're not buying, but you're trying to sell them on it. How did that go with your family, bro?
Well, just like you said, they're looking at me like, what the fuck are you talking about? But I was so delusional that I believed myself. So really and truly, like that is the honesty and the principle of step 1 in my experience, was not being honest to those around me. Like that, everybody could fucking see. They were just waiting for me to get it, you know. But being honest to myself, to actually conceding to my innermost self that this was a problem, that this was the disease, that this was going to require a solution that I could not bring upon myself, you know, but I couldn't see that. That was the insanity, right? And you talk about the differentiating the true from the false. It's that double-edged sword of not only, like, for 2 reasons this time it's going to be different, right? It's going to be different because I'll be able to control it and not burn my life to the ground. And that elusive feeling where this time it's going to be different because I'm going to get the feeling that I've been chasing for so long that has eluded me, you know? So I convince myself that it's going to work, and also that it's not going to be injurious to me, even though I know through practical experience every time I do this, it gets me to the same place. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. Sometimes it comes out in different forms. But I can't see that. Everyone around me can see that. They are tapped in, and they know that is what's going to happen. And they're trying. They're pleading. They're begging for me to fucking realize this, you know? And I can't see it. And that's the shittiest part about this disease, is that it convinces me that I don't have it for so long, you know? And I've seen it with so many people that finally do come out of it, and some of those that never actually get the experience of being able to talk about their last drink or drug, because it does actually take them out, you know. And I pursued that to the gates of insanity, you know, to the point where I did question, what the fuck am I doing? Like, how am I can't see my life with or without it. That was how it was. And I was like, well, then what do I do, right? Even though the solution had been presented to me, I could not in those years hear it, because after that, you know, after doing this again and, you know, succumbing to this disease again, I fought it because I was self-aware at this point. You know, I knew, you know, I could recognize a lot of the time, most of the time, that it was going to be injurious. So I'm very self-aware. Now, not doing anything to take care of that actually created so much shame inside of me, because I was like, why? Why can't I get this? Why can't I do better? I know I don't want to drink or use. I know that it's going to hurt me. And given enough time, I forget that. And then, you know, I come back with my tail between my legs after going on a bender and disappearing for days and not talking to anybody that loves me. And they're panicking, trying to find me. And they're like, why, Tyler? Why did you do this again? And with all of the sincerity and honestness in myself, I said, I don't know. And I couldn't see why I was doing this, right? And I didn't know how to approach that. So that made me feel so shameful. It made me feel so shitty about who I was as a person. And I understand today, again, to differentiate the recovery from the abstinence, I know today that there's a difference between shame and guilt, right? I know that through doing the steps of reconstruction through the 4 through 9, that shame is who I am. Guilt is what I've done. Guilt is a wonderful fucking thing for me today. I embrace guilt because it means I can recognize that I've done something erroneous. I've made a mistake, and I can use that guilt as a motivator to do better, to make it right, to fix it, right? Whereas the shame, if I truly think that these defects of character are all that I am as a human being, well, that's a pretty fucking shitty outlook, right? And it's really hard to see that there's going to be a solution that's going to make me a better person if I think so poorly of myself based on my self-awareness without a solution, right? And that's a dangerous place to be, is being self-aware without the solution. That's why step 2 is the hope. The hope is that this is an introduction to what the disease is. And here's the hope that now we're making you self-aware. Yeah, I'm becoming self-aware, but there's a way out. And as long as I remember that there's a way out, I can be free from that shame, because the shame is hopeless. There's no way I can move forward just thinking that I'm such a piece of shit that I keep hurting everybody around me. And when I looked at them after a relapse, and I fucking made eye contact, and it was from the bottom of my heart, I said, I won't do this again. I would have passed a lie detector test in those moments, because that was my truth. My truth was clouded by my disease, and I would inevitably do it again. But in those moments, coming out of emerging from a spree, yeah, I was telling the truth.
Bro, that's a great description. I want to kind of switch some gears based on where we're at in this discussion. I know you have an ex-wife and some kids and, family that really loves you. How did those relationships look as you were burning them down over and over? And what were some of the results of, your inability to put your life back together and manage it yourself? And like, I know today you're not with your ex. I'm pretty sure you have great relationships with most of your family. But how did that dissolve, and like, where is that at today?
Yeah. So fortunately, through the work that I've done, and I've gotten the rewards for most of my family and close friends to be able to rebuild those relationships, right? To have them and to have them, not even rebuild, to build up. Like they're in a place that they never existed in before, because I've changed so much, and I can be there for them in ways that I never could before, because I was so caught up in self. But the progression of my relationship, with my ex, who's a wonderful human being, she's normal. She doesn't suffer from addiction. She has, her issues for sure, like everybody else does, but she's not suffering the way that we do, right? So she could never truly understand. Like, for so long, I remember her just asking me why. And she would get so mad because she's like, just tell me why you can't get this thing under control. And I had no answer at that time. So, bless her fucking heart for staying with me for as long as she did. I don't know how or why, but I think because of my ability to manage that unmanageability back into, the stream of life, I gave her hope, which was a horrible thing to do to somebody like that, where I showed her enough of who I could have been that she stuck around, right? And I broke that hope time and time again. And I remember, like after a series of relapses, so, basically over the next 10 years, it was me trying my best not to drink and use, going that, 6, 8, 10 months, a year, whatever it is, running on self-will, before I would relapse again. But I would give her that hope in those moments and burn it all down. So I remember the one time I came back from a spree, I disappeared my thing was disappearing for days. And I came back, and, after all these times of her breaking down and her crying and pleading and begging and all that frothy emotional appeal, she wasn't crying that time. And I knew in that moment that I fucked up beyond repair. And I fucking sat in that, and that hurt so much because I was like, I broke this human, right? Like I fucking, I try to think today that maybe I don't have the power to truly heal or break or do that damage. But in that moment, man, that fucking shame that came with looking at her, and she didn't cry. And I knew that I had done so much damage to this woman, the mother of my children, that dedicated her life to them, to me, to being a supportive partner, to being an amazing parent. I broke her through that. And that's where so much shame built up, because I was like, why? Now it's not her questioning me why anymore. It's me questioning myself. Why can't I do this? I can be so successful in all these other areas of life. And we read about it in all the stories in the books, and you hear about it in all these meetings and all these rooms and all these people, where it's like in all other areas of life, yeah, I was pretty fucking successful. And it didn't come out to me until our conversation yesterday on the phone, when you asked me what changed this time. What was different for me coming in this time? Why did it work this time? Yeah, I never thought about that. And this was like an epiphany that hit me, was that I couldn't foresee in the last moments of my addiction, where I was worse than I'd ever been. It was 4 months or so of fucking just misery and terror and pain. And basically I was ready to end it all before I decided to truly give it a try. But it was because for once in my life, why it changed in that moment before I came into recovery, was that I couldn't see myself managing that unmanageability anymore. Up until that point, I just knew that if I relied on myself, I would get myself out of these situations. And I had burnt it to the ground so bad by that point that I had to, because I couldn't foresee the outcome of me taking care of things and building everything back up. I'd lost so much at this point, and I'd done so much damage that I couldn't foresee the outcome. And that's when I truly was able to let God in and let this program in and do the work with the willingness and the desperation of a drowning man, because I was fucking drowning for once in my life. I couldn't see myself swimming out of that pool. And that was a scary, desperate, lonely, terrible place to be. But it was everything I needed for this to finally fucking work. So what my rock bottom looked like was not materialistic for once in my life. It had always been material things. This was just an actual conceding to myself that I couldn't fix this. And that's what I needed for it to rocket me into this program.
Awesome, bro. You were telling me the other day when we were talking on the phone of like how you came to almost taking your own life. And then the events that kind of transpired up to the people that finally came to your rescue and said, you're doing this, right? Can you kind of walk our listeners through like, what that looked like in those last days where you were going to take your life, and kind of how you got back into recovery, and you've just alluded to like what's changed. Can you walk our listeners through that?
Yeah, so that was the darkest point of my life, for sure. Like I said, the last relapse was the king of all relapses. So I was doing things I never thought I would fucking do. Hitting rock bottoms that I never thought I was going to hit materially, and all that. What it was building up to was that spiritual rock bottom, which I see now and I'm totally content with. But in that moment, the darkest time, I'd been up for days, hadn't eaten, I wasn't doing anything. I was isolating. I was just being a fiend. And I came to terms with the fact that I couldn't go on living like this anymore. And I didn't see a way out. Like I said, I didn't have to see a way out in that moment, because something else was working for me in that moment. But it was dark, and I made the decision that it's not that I wanted to die. I just didn't want to live anymore. I couldn't handle this shame and this, all of the things that came with me doing this. So I made the decision, and, I took some steps to prepare myself to take my own life, to be frank. I set up I recorded a video saying goodbye to everybody I knew, and I set it on a time delay for an email to go to my older brother. And, even in that, I'm just like, I told him, don't come to the house, just send the cops. It's going to be too late. And I pulled the truck into the garage, rolled the windows down. I sat there in the truck, coming to terms with the fact that I was about to end my own life. And I opened up my phone and I started looking at pictures of my kids, and it fucking hit me like a bolt of lightning. I said, get the fuck out of this truck and get back in that house. You're not doing this right now. You can do it later, but you're not doing it right now. And I don't know I know today where it came from. In the moment, I didn't know where it came from, and I didn't need to. I fucking did it. Thank God. Thank everything that was working in my favor in that moment that propelled me back into the house and out of that truck. And, I delayed it, and I pushed it a little bit further. But then the second stage to that was this other bolt of lightning that hit me that said, hey, remember when your best friends in this whole world, the people that love you unconditionally, said, if you ever feel like this again, you need to fucking reach out to us? So this moment of clarity came, and I was like, well, fuck it then. I'll send them a text. They're not going to be able to do anything. This is hopeless. It's, it's a waste of time, but whatever. I'll just send them this text. So I sent him a text and said, hey, I'm about to do something real fucking stupid. And within moments, my best friend was banging on my door and scared the shit out of me because I'm fucking paranoid. I'm sketchy. I haven't slept in days. This guy's kicking on my door, and I remember him yelling, if you don't open the door, I'm going to kick it the fuck in. And I was like, oh shit, I should probably open the door. So I opened the door, I let them in, and it was two of my best friends, and they showed the fuck up, in that moment. And I remember standing there and just seeing the disappointment in their eyes and them being like, you need to do something to get better. And intellectually, intellectualizing my problem, I was like, well, what the fuck is going to change this time? I've been through treatment. I've done the book. I've done the steps. Nothing changed. And they were like, I don't know, but you need to try. And I kept arguing with them, and I kept trying to convince them and tell them that it wasn't going to be working, that I was terminally unique, and something about me was so much different than everybody else that this had worked for in the past, that it wasn't going to work for me. And they were like, would you say that same thing to your son if he was sitting on the other side of this counter? And I was like, no, I would never stop fighting,
Take a minute, buddy. I know that's bringing up some pretty heavy emotions, and just take a minute, bro.
And I said to them, no, I would never stop fighting for my son. I would never give up. I don't care what it would take. I wouldn't let him go. And they said, that's what we're doing here. We're not letting you go. And it hit a lot different that time. And I just didn't have the fucking will to fight it anymore. I had tried every avenue. I had exhausted every option that I could think of to say why it wouldn't work for me. And I ran out of fucking excuses in that moment. And I said, you know what then? I'll do this. I'll go to a fucking treatment center. I don't see how it's going to work, but I'll do it. And it created this motivation of spite for me, where I said, I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to do it so fucking well. And again, ego, right? Ego was so big for me that I'm going to do it better than everyone, and it's still not going to work for me. Watch me do this. And they were like, all right, as long as you fucking do it, man, we don't care why. You just need to do it. All right. So there I went, and I went in, I everything lined up. I got into a treatment center so quickly before I ended up, doing damage that was irreversible physically to myself. And I get in this treatment center, and I'm like, fuck you guys, watch me. I'm going to do this better than anyone else has ever done it before, and it's not going to work. And I did that. But the problem was that it worked. It started to actually work. And it was because I had removed that self fucking satisfying idea that I could manage my way out of this. I didn't have that going in there, and it's funny because I look back at the principles and how I apply them to my life and how I had to live them in these experiences. And there was no integrity in there, because I look at integrity as like doing the right thing for the right reason. I was doing the right thing for the wrong reason in that moment, but it didn't matter. I was doing the right thing until the reason came in, right? And that's all it took in the early stages of recovery, and in the early stages at that treatment center, which is a 12-step based treatment center, focuses highly on spirituality, and it was exactly what I needed when I needed it. Didn't matter why I was doing it. The fact was I was doing it. And then I started to see those things change inside of me. And I started, I went from that just complete surrender in my step one this time, because I proved to myself, you're fucked, dude. The manageability that you've had up until this point is gone. So that's when I was truly able to concede to the three aspects of the disease. And I struggled with that God thing. And I was like, how is there something more powerful than me? Even though I've seen it, and every word in We Agnostics makes perfect sense to me, I couldn't see it. And I was told, stop looking for it. You don't need to see it. Just have the hope that it's going to work. Put it out there. When you pray, you don't need to know where those prayers end up. Just throw them out there. And I did. And I saw this change start happening in every aspect of what I was doing, because I started to see it coming to fruition. I would pray and then things would change. And I would pray and things would change. So for me, I had to see it in hindsight, right? And I look at faith today as you know, the clarity of my faith is based in hindsight. I can't see it going forward, but I don't have to today. I can look back and see where it's been active in every area of my recovery up to this point. And when I thought things needed to happen a certain way and they went fucking completely sideways, and look at where it turned out. And that hindsight of being able to look back and recognize where God was in all of that is a fucking beautiful motivator to be able to go forward without knowing where it's going to end up. And that was the massive spiritual change that I received.
Dude, that's amazing. I love doing these interviews because every time I talk with somebody, it always brings up things in my life. And one of the things that your story is bringing up in my life is, like, I have 3 daughters. I have my ex-wife. And, you know, as you were telling the story about how you were destroying these relationships and, you know, your friend saying, you know, if your son was sitting on the other side of this counter, would you say that? You know, all of these things you're saying are bringing up so many emotions and memories within me. And I remember as I'm burning down the lives of my whole family, and my ex-wife and my kids didn't know what was wrong. They knew I was in some type of depression, but I was such a good manipulator, and I was able to hide it so well that they didn't even know what was happening. And I ended up burning it all down, and I lost everything, right? Like, you know, I lost the wife and the family, and I lost the business, and I lost my money, and I ended up, you know, living on that property that was in foreclosure in a trailer that I borrowed back from my ex-wife, who was fiercely mad at me. And even over the first 2 years of recovery, bro, my daughters and ex-wife, they were really mad because I had just ripped out the carpet from underneath their lives, and they were essentially fucked. My ex-wife, who, like you describing your ex, is a godsend, like just a beautiful person, beautiful, loving human being. Over those years, she was trying to love me, but she was so mad at me. And we never actually did get back together. But you had mentioned you always trying to get the results that you wanted. And sometimes it would be even with good intention, right? So as I'm in recovery, I'm trying to like help my daughters and my ex-wife in ways, but it was the way that I wanted to help them. And it was actually the motive underneath the intention was selfish. So it didn't actually work. And I was always wondering, why won't these people listen or get it? You know, and it wasn't until I had a spiritual awakening about 3 years ago with my daughters. And I was like, because I would always talk about the program and I would always talk about God and shit, they were getting more angry. I actually had to shut it the fuck down. And then I read this book called Seed of the Soul. And once I read that book, I was like, holy fuck. My daughters aren't even my daughters. They're God's daughters. They're Creator's daughters. And I have no right to tell them what to do, but I do have a right of being responsible for my own life and my own recovery. And in our big book, it talks about there is a long period of reconstruction ahead. Most people interpret that line that I got to go fix these relationships. That's what I was trying to do, but I was making them worse. Really, the reconstruction ahead is me. There's a long period of reconstruction ahead within me. I have to allow this God and my willingness to work with His will and allow Him to build with me and do with me as Thou will, as He will do with me. And once I got that, I shut up and I just started living the program. And my daughters finally started coming around, right? And it was years later, they had come to me and asked me to work the steps. And, you know, it's been over a year since they've worked that first set of steps, and they've both, you know, struggled back and forth, in and out a bit, but they keep coming back to that solution. And I don't ever tell them what to do anymore. and they're on their own journey of healing. And as long as I can just be there, and if they want advice, I give it to them. And if they don't, I don't, bro. But where I'm going with this story is my ex-wife, she had struggled with the spiritual malady, trying to like fix everything through the years I was in recovery. And she ended up really hurting herself with her own defects to the point where her own shame was taking her out. And I would been talking to her, and she was like really ill and saying things that I didn't want to hear, like, I don't want to be here anymore. And, you know, I know those thoughts because I had them too, right? And I was like, fuck, like you had mentioned how you broke this beautiful human being. And I had broken this woman like not just once, but many times throughout the years, and not even knowing she was breaking because her pride was trying to hide it. And then there was a point last year, and I kept telling her, because she kept going to counseling and psychiatrists, and I saw no results, right? She wasn't changing. And that is very normal. A lot of people will go to the psychiatrists and psychologists, alcoholic and non-alcoholic, and it doesn't really do the spiritual awakening. It doesn't do the personality change, right? Because we've never really looked at the depths of what the illness is, the shame and the guilt and the self-centeredness that we can't see. So I kept telling her it's a spiritual problem, but she didn't really get it. But then I remember I was trying to help her one last time last year, and she wasn't fucking listening again, my way. And I just said, you know what? Fuck it, Shannon. I'm not helping you anymore. Do whatever you want to do. I'll be there for my kids, and that's it. I can't do anything. And then I left her. And she was probably crying and, you know, broken again. And then I was sitting at my table one day before a meeting on Zoom, and I had this intuition, and it just came to me all of a sudden. It was like 10:30 at night, and it was like, help her one more time. Go try one more time. So I called her, texted her, and said, hey, can you meet me? And she's like, yeah. I said, okay, I'll come to your house and I'll pick you up and we'll go for a drive. And the one thing that I'd never done is I'd never told her the actual truth about my own spiritual awakening, and, you know, having to lose my family and having to lose my business and my money and my house, and having to get so broken as a human being that I could try something different. And why I had never really taken this approach and told her these things, because I was always trying to not hurt her more. And really what I was doing is I'm playing God again, right? At 6 years sobriety, I'm still playing God. And this was the big difference maker. As this time I told her, Shannon, I had to lose you. I had to lose the kids. I had to lose the business, the house, everything I owned. I had to get so broken and find this really, really dark place where I wanted to end it all, so that I could find this new path of finding out who I really was. And as I'm telling her all these aspects of losing it all, I'm like, she's not wanting to hear it either, but she's listening, right? And she's crying as I'm explaining my own journey of how I had to find this black place within myself. And she's listening. And it was through that experience that she was able to go, you know what? I fucking hear you. And I get it. And then I said, in your darkness and your blackness, and, you know, she's telling me things about how she doesn't want to live anymore. She doesn't want to leave the daughters, but she doesn't see any hope for her life. And I'm like, this is your blackness. Yes, you're not an alcoholic or addict. You don't have a substance use problem, but you have the spiritual malady. Your substances are, you know, your distractions with your phone. Your distractions are your self-pity. Your malady is the self-pity and the martyrdom and the victim mentality. Your problem is your thinking, and it's taking you down to a place where you don't want to fucking be here anymore. And maybe this is your opportunity that you can take and seize and grow through this. And so through this like God-centered moment of deep vulnerability with the both of us, she actually took that opportunity and she's been running with it. She ended up getting a sponsor. She ended up doing this work at a deep level with somebody who knew what they were doing, that really gives a fuck about her. And she's like growing in ways that I've never seen her grow. And she's challenging herself. She's taking a lot of that spiritual malady that she's so afraid to look at, and she's bringing her creator in, God in, whatever it is, and she's looking at it, and she's being held with a hand by her sponsor. And like our relationship today is so different, and it's such a deep, good friendship that we have that we'll never forget the memories that we've had, and we're building new memories in a different way. And like our family in some ways is still intact because that bond of the heart with me and her and our daughters, is just so strong. And, so I'm just so thankful and grateful for this woman and her journey. And I try to support her as part of my living amends because she is worth it. And she's such a beautiful human. And where she's at right now is she's looking for her purpose. Where can she be of maximum service? Where can she use her natural gifts and abilities like you and I are in our own journeys? So I just wanted to share that experience because everything that you've been saying has really been stirring up a lot of emotions within me and allowing me to heal a little more as I express this here again today. So I just want to thank you for that, bro. You're on.
So I think that like the takeaway for me from that is that relatability. That's like that depth and weight that we learn. Working with others isn't just working with addicts and alcoholics. Yes, that should be our primary focus, because they're the ones that probably need this more than anyone else. But like we talked about before, so many people suffer from the obsession and the spiritual malady. They just don't have the allergy, which I'm grateful for today because it propelled me into that fifth dimension, that state of recovery. But why I think this is relatable and you sharing that story is that when working with others, that vulnerability, that your ability in that moment to put yourself out there, to speak your genuine truth of what had to happen and how bad it had to get is relatable, right? To so many people, non-addicts, addicts, alcoholics, doesn't matter. Like people in general, other human beings need us to be vulnerable, to be relatable. And in working with others, this is the biggest piece I was missing to any sort of semblance of recovery that I had ever had or pursued or anything before. Why it's working today for me is genuinely working with others, to take me out of myself and to be able to share my experiences, strength and hope, and have that depth and weight. And I love telling people about, when we look at working with others and we look at why this 12-step fellowship and this foundation of recovery works is goes back to when Bill went to go see Dr. Bob. And Dr. Bob, everybody had told Dr. Bob, you need to do this, you need to do that, your life's, all the frothy emotional appeal, all that shit, please do this for us, please do that. He didn't want to hear it. He couldn't hear it. But the reason that it worked, and when Bill went to go see Dr. Bob, and it was I'll give this guy 15 minutes, and then 6 hours later, they're still sitting there talking about it because it's working, is because he started selling the problem, not the solution. He sold the problem enough for Bob to be like, well, how did you get the solution? Because I can see you are a different man than the person you are explaining to me today. The person you're explaining to me today is where I'm at. You're meeting me where I'm at, and I can relate to that. But holy fuck, you're not that guy anymore. So what did you do between then and now that's made the difference? And, you showed your ex that you had changed. Like, she could see it. Everyone can see it, right? That's the thing with us, is everybody else sees it so much clearer than we do in ourselves. You had made the changes. You had done the work. You'd put in the effort, and you constantly showed up. So something had changed, and she could see that. But maybe the portion that she was missing was that relatability to where she was at in that moment, where you had to fucking get in that hole with her. And you had to sit in that shit and say, I can relate because this is what had to change for me. And I try and do that with everybody that I work with now, is not tell them how fucking amazing recovery is on the other end. They can see that. Most people can see that. They see that something's changed. What they need to hear from me is what it was like then, right? What had to go so horribly fucking wrong in my life, that propellant of alcohol and drugs to take me to my bottom that was sufficient enough for me to do the work that got me to where I am today. And that's where that real fucking connection comes, that hopefully inspires people to be like, I don't want this anymore. I don't know what to do, but I just know I don't want this. And then that's when, we as recovered members of this community can say, okay, well then here, are you willing to do the work that it takes? And the work isn't fucking scary, and the God shouldn't be scary. Like, I gave my higher power was drugs and alcohol for so long. It was women, it was work, it was fucking anything other than a higher power, because I didn't know what to do to get to that. And it's like, I don't have to figure out the answers today. I just have to listen to the people that have done the work before me and be like, how did you do this? How did you get from point A to point B? And then they tell me, and I'm like, okay, stop questioning that. Stop trying to take what they did and make it my own version of that. Just do it. Go through those motions. And sometimes it's blindly having the faith to go through those motions, to take those steps, not knowing what the outcome is. And then the results come. And when I see those results come, and sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, it's pretty wild when my conviction is good and I actually just really do something that I don't want to do, or, like the removal of those defects of character, how quickly the results come and how wildly accurate they are. And I'm like, holy shit. And of course it happens like that. I'm at the point now when these massive spiritual things happen and these great rewards come, in the shape of not material, but something so much deeper. I'm like, of course that happened, because it's borne out in the experiences of me doing this shit and seeing the results looking back. And that's the rewards, man. Like that's what's truly made my life great today is doing it without the expectation of outcome. Knowing that I don't need to know where it goes, because if I trust in a power that's greater than me, that has all the variables that I don't have in my human experience, I can't see all these different angles. I can just trust that something that does see all of them is going to lead me on a path that's going to get me where I need to be, and maybe not where I want to be. And things just get better and better and better. And that's a fucking beautiful reward, right?
Yeah, bro. Fuck yeah. So kind of getting back to your path and your journey, you're in recovery, you got a sponsor, he's leading the way, you've had a different shift within you, so the work becomes something that you actually desire, because there's now like real hope, and the gates of hell have actually closed on you with a clang, and now you can move forward in your recovery. So as we finish off the last 10 or 15 minutes here, why don't you walk us through what it was like working with your sponsor, and maybe some of the challenges that you've encountered through, maybe relationships, friendships, intimate relationships. What are some of the biggest growth hurdles that you've had so far in your recovery?
Yeah, so I mean, actually doing the fucking work, that hard work, you and I know are very much on the same page through experience. Again, this isn't theory or our crazy ideas. This is what we've seen in our actual lives play out, is that first set of steps, that free recovery you get from treatment. I hear you say all the time, and I fucking love when you do it. And a lot of people don't love it, and they recoil from that as if from a hot flame, because it's the fucking truth. Is I look at these as fire extinguisher steps, right? So when I come in and my motivation is to be, free from the consequences, or free from drugs and alcohol, or whatever that looks like in very early recovery, doing a thorough set of steps will remove that. Generally, if I've done them to the best of my ability, great, because my focus at that point is the disease, on the surface level, right? That drugs and alcohol. And I'm starting to learn that that's not the problem, that the actual problem lies within myself and whatnot. So, I did a treatment set of steps, and lo and behold, it did some magical, wonderful, fucking life-changing things for me. But then it was time to do the real work, where it was like, get a fucking sponsor, do the steps again on a deeper level, because now at this point, I'm still very early in recovery, but I've recognized the fact that drugs and alcohol weren't the problem. Now, my first set of steps solved what I thought was the problem, which I know it's not the problem now. So what do I do? Okay, so let's do this again, and let's do it on a deeper level. Let's really apply the shit that I'm taking in from doing these steps to life, to every aspect of my being, right? And then you get that deep stuff. That's when I got the deeper stuff. That's when my spiritual connection got a lot stronger. That's when my step 4 changed, because it wasn't that surface level shit. This was some deeper level step 4 stuff. And then my deeper level step 5 of being like, okay, we're not talking about these surface level defects of character anymore. The whys of the hows and whys of me drinking and doing drugs. We're talking about the shit that makes me miserable when I'm sober. Right? Those defects. And I really try with every man I work with going forward, and having done since I redid my steps, is in a step 5 is finding the root of every one of those defects. I don't give my guys a fucking shopping list of defects when they leave. We sit and we practice working out, okay, if anger is a defect of my character, well, what does that spawn from? What of those 4 things, selfishness, dishonesty, fear, and resentment, where does it go back to that? And how do we trace that back to its starting point? Well, anger is a byproduct of fear for me. I know that through my experience and through doing the work. So can I relate that to these guys and have them see how lashing out in anger is actually just them fearing the uncontrollable outcome of a situation? Yeah, we can. And we practice this in all of their resentments and all of their fears and their sex conduct, and, sex conduct being actual relationships with the opposite sex, not intercourse, like a lot of people in treatment kind of glaze over and they're like, just write down all the girls you've cheated on and you're good. No, fucking no. Where are the patterns in my relationships with other human beings? Because that's going to allow me in those moments, if I'm truly going forward and doing a 6 and 7 through the practical application of a step 10 in further recovery, and we're getting deeper here, is I have to know where those start. Because if I don't know where they start, I'm relying on just being able to stomp out these little fires. No, I want to go to the root of that and pull it out. So when lust comes up in my life today, can I trace that back? Where am I being selfish in that, right? Am I being dishonest to women? Because page 69 in the big book, it tells us, that these are God-given things and that we are going to want them. But how do we deal with them? So the fact that they come up is not the issue for me today. It's being able to know that I'm acting out with motives and intention that is not based in fear, dishonesty, selfishness, because that will inevitably develop resentments around anyone I interact with if I'm basing my actions on those things, right? So that's really that next level shit that I didn't know was possible through doing a treatment set of steps. And I wouldn't be here without those treatment steps. But I wouldn't be where I'm at without the next set of steps and working with a God-centered man that called me on my bullshit. And when I started to question these things about, okay, where are my defects coming from and stuff, he's like, trace it back, And when I'm like, hey, am I acting out in defects? He's like, you wouldn't be speaking to me if you didn't truly feel like there was some defects of character here. So how do we work that back, and how do we make it right, and how do we remove them? And that's step 6. And I know you fucking are passionate about this, and I feed off your passion for it. It wasn't explained to me in the treatment center what a step 6 looks like. It's not a fucking paragraph in the book. Of course I want to be free from these defects. I just sat down with another man and he pointed out all these flaws in me. I don't want them. Why would you want them, right? Why would I want them is because up until this point in my life, they have been my defaults. They have been what I naturally built up through experiences to protect what I thought was protecting myself, right? So what does it look like to actually be rid of them? Well, it's not me giving them up. It's not me making a wish to be free of fucking defects of character and God coming down on a cloud and, blessing me and saying, okay, son, you have no more defects of character. Fuck that. I have defects of character. And the only way that they can be removed is for me to go through experiences from God where I get to have the free will to choose what I do. Do I take the spiritual path, or do I take what I've always done, which is Tyler, which is selfishness, fear, dishonesty, resentment? No, I make the choice. And I can't see that in a step 6, but I can have a general understanding to make the decision in 6 and 7 that I'm going to sit back and have God remove these defects, not to just be free of them based on a decision, but through experiences, have them removed from me. And I don't get to control those experiences. So do I know what that looks like? No, not at all. But I'm open and willing in moving forward to have the humility to be able to accept them when they come, because I don't know when they're going to come. I have no idea what tomorrow holds, what today holds. And God has a fucking really good idea. And God's like, okay, dude, you made a decision to not lash out in anger anymore. Okay, let's say that's the lesson I have to learn today. God's going to present me with a person, place, or thing that is going to trigger my anger response. And in that moment, if I can pause and I can recognize that this is a test, that this is an exercise in a removal of a defect of character, it's a lot easier for me to fucking tone it down and just say, take a deep breath and be like, no, in this moment, I'm going to choose to do what I said I was going to choose to do, which is not lash out in anger, to not pick this guy up by his fucking neck and smash him against the wall like I would have loved to do before. No, I'm going to do better today. And each one of those little experiences is a culmination to a thing where I am free in those step 10 promises. I'm free from this. I don't fight anything or anyone, and that's a wild place to be, because I wanted to fight everything and everyone all the time before. And if I let my defects come back in, I will want to fight everything and everyone, because I need you to know how right I am. I need you to know how strong I am. I need you to see me. I need my ego to be stroked by you telling me how good I'm doing. Well, I don't need that today. As long as I keep making these small decisions throughout the course of every day where I choose to do what I said I would choose to do. And if I fail, there's a fucking solution to that. I don't have to figure it out. I just do what I'm told, what I'm taught through a step 10, which is the actual exact opposite. There's steps to a step 10, which is the opposite of selfishness, dishonesty, fear, and then I'm free from resentment. And it's like through practical application of that, I can see it working, and I trust it. I trust it more and more every time I do it.
So you're touching base on some things that, out of the book, one of my favorites is faith alone is insufficient. To be vital, it must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. And if the real problem of our illness is this selfish self-centeredness, we got to be rid of this. So in these little micro moments throughout the day, we're actually presented with the selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, which are all still based in some sort of foundation of self. And we have the opportunity in that moment to bring our Creator in and to try to do something different with some spiritual value in it. And when we first make these decisions, like to not act in it, typically we're acting in a different way out of the fear of the repercussions of what would happen if I do it, knowing at that deep level that self is the issue. I don't want to go there anymore, so I want to avoid the pain of it, so I do something different, which is, yes, okay, I am self-sacrificing in that moment, not really for the benefit of you, it's more for the benefit of me, which brings me to the definition of altruism. Way back in the book, it talks about we work out our solution on the spiritual and altruistic plane. So in that moment, I'm making a spiritual decision to take a different path, but I'm not actually being altruistic in that decision in the moment, because I'm just avoiding a consequence that I don't want. So that's a selfish motive. Still a good thing to do. So really what it is, it's an act of altruism. But as we keep doing these things over and over and over and over, millimeter by millimeter, circumstance by circumstance, down the road, it becomes altruistic. Down the road, I don't do it because I actually give a fuck about you and I don't want to hurt you. And the difference in step 6 and 7 is step 6 is I'm making these decisions to try something different, typically with a reservation. The reservation is okay, if I take this other path, how is it going to affect me? And then we're always worried about self. But down the road, we make the right decision without reservation because it's just the right thing to do. So we recoil from judgment as from a hot flame. We recoil from anger as from a hot flame. I recoil from gossip as from a hot flame. I recoil from the act of lust or whatever the manifestations of lust may be as from a hot flame. Why? Because I actually have become altruistic, which is I unselfishly devoting myself to the welfare, well-being, and happiness of you. And through that, I get it also. And through faith alone is insufficient to be vital, which means to give life, right? To really give you life, a good life, it must be accompanied by this self-sacrifice that actually allows me to draw nearer to God. And then it takes me to the unselfish constructive action. And then I want to be of service to people. I want to help people. So it's just a natural flow of the stream into the process. By relinquishing self, I become useful to other people. So I love how you really, really detailed that out. So as we kind of get near, a little further down the path here, what are some of the things that you're doing today? I'd like you to touch on like pillars and service.
Yeah, so I mean, the way I look at service today, it's funny because again, going against how I did it so wrong in the first part. I thought when the first time I went through treatment, I was like, 12 step, be of service, chair meetings, pour coffee, do all this stuff. That's the 7th tradition. That's not the 12th step. Yes, it has elements of the 12th step in it, but I thought that was all it took was like, well, if I'm of service in some form to the fellowship, that's me being 12th stepped and doing God's work. No, it's fucking not. Like, it's necessary, but it's not that. It's not everything that encompasses a 12th step. So to be of service today in all areas of my life, yes, I focus really heavily on the alcoholics and the addicts, but I also offer my services to anybody that I can help because God doesn't just look after addicts and alcoholics. He wants me out there helping all of my brothers and sisters in any way that I'm possible, because if he's given me the ability to do that, who the fuck am I to hold that back and not want to give that back? And I look at it like this. I made the decision in early recovery to really simplify this for myself. I said, when I'm asked to do so, if I'm following God's path and God's putting these people and situations in front of me for a reason, whatever that reason is, I'll figure it out as we go. But I can't judge it judgment prior to exploration. I got to go through it, and then I can look back and figure out what the lesson was or what the experience was. So when I'm asked, I made the decision in early recovery. When I'm asked to do something, I ask myself 2 questions. Am I able to do this? And that goes down some roads of, okay, like, can I, like, do I have what it takes to do this in any way? Sure. Is it going to negatively affect my recovery? So if the answer is yes, I can do this, and no, it's not going to affect my recovery, I just say yes. I don't question the hows and the whys and the whens and all the intricate details. That is really just an obsession of my mind trying to take me away from self, or take me away from these service actions and put me back in self. So I made that decision very early on in recovery, where if someone asks me to do it and I can, and it's not going to hurt my recovery, the answer is yes. I'll show up and I'll do my best, And that has led to wonderful fucking experiences just by doing that course of action. And then making sure that, I rely on these people that are God-centered and 12-stepped around me. When I call you for advice, when I reach out to, other really, really trusted people, and I trust these people because I see them fucking doing this thing, not getting up at meetings and saying some fancy shit that sounds really cool and then going out and fucking just living their life however they want, rampant and fucking free will and not God-centered. I see them living in God-centered behaviors, right? I see the results of that, and I'm like, okay, this is somebody that I believe I can trust, that I believe I can rely on, that I believe is going to call me on my bullshit when I need to be called on, or reassure me that I'm doing what I should be doing when I am actually doing it, because I do question myself a lot, right? And that's okay. as long as I'm talking about it. You know, if I sit in that shit, it becomes an obsession. If I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm acting, on God's will here. I think this is my will. And I bounce it back and forth inside that's the chaos. That is obsession. Obsession has many different forms for me. So if I don't speak it out to people that I can rely on, and then shut the fuck up and listen for their feedback and absorb it with humility and love and honesty and all these principles that I've learned through the practical application of these steps, well, what am I even asking them for? It's like when I pray and I don't meditate, right? There's two parts to this. I got to ask for something, and then I got to shut up and fucking listen to it. Even when I don't want to hear what the answer is, gotta listen to it because they're probably right. In my experience, and this again is not a theory, this is through my practical application and experience, they're usually right. If they're God-centered and I'm approaching them and their motives are good and their intentions are good, it's God talking through them, and I can listen to that.
Awesome. So we're gonna wind it down, but I want to ask you two questions, bro. The first one is, for anybody new in recovery or that was a chronic relapser that hasn't really given the actual program a fair shot, or just anyone new in recovery, what is your message to them?
So I try and use that cautionary tale of what I did wrong in early recovery to try and the hope is that they hear how much pain and suffering I had to go through before I went and did this the proper way. The hope is that they learn from that, that they see that you don't have to fucking drag it out that long. And then my challenge to them is kind of twofold. It comes from who am I to say that there's no God? If that's the barrier that they have, where it's like, well, fuck, I can't let this God thing in, or, God, look at all the things that God's done to me in my life up until this point. It's like, who the fuck am I to say that there's no God? Challenging that, it's like I had given up my will, my life to a higher power that was drugs, alcohol, all these other things, these delusions. Why can't I just try this? Why can't I do it and see if it works? Because again, with that integrity piece, I came into recovery doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. If that's what you got to do today in early recovery, do the right thing for the wrong reasons. If your motives aren't in check, if it's not altruistic when you start helping other people, if it's not, to find that path to inner peace and spiritual awakening, that's fine. Just do the work and see what happens, because I had to just do the work to see what happens. And it's like, you can just save yourself so much pain and misery if you just be open-minded and willing. I'm not special. I'm not unique. I don't have access to any other information, people, places, things that other people in early recovery don't have. And it worked for me. But the only thing that I had to do this time, that I really had to do to just get going, was get that book, get the sponsor, get willing to just try it and see what happens, And as I did that more and more, the experiences built up to a point where I'm like, who the fuck am I to question this program? Who am I to question these people that have come before me and had everything that I didn't even know I could have, and I want that. So when I come up to these people, these pillars, these God-centered people that I surround myself with, and I'm like, you have what I want, how did you get it? And then I just try it. Right? I don't need to know how it's going to turn out. I don't need to even know if that's the right answer, because I've done so many things wrong for so long that I'm like, well, fuck, why not try it? Right? Just become willing to try it, open-minded to the solution that clearly is working for other people around me. That's what changed me. So, for the people that are starting out and they got all these roadblocks and these barriers up, and I was there. I had that. I didn't think this was going to work for me. And here I am sitting on the other side of it, living proof. I just had to do some work.
Okay, beautiful. You kind of reminded me of a quick little story that I like to share. The program is like a merry-go-round. The faster the merry-go-round goes, if you're in the middle, you're fine, right? If you're sitting in the middle, remember when you were a kid and you were sitting in the middle of the merry-go-round, there was no worries. But the further you get off of that merry-go-round, the more you got to hold on. And by the time you're at the edge of the merry-go-round, as it's spinning around, you're like flying off. hanging on with your fingertips, right? And that's kind of like what the program is. And I know that you've been in the center doing the service, doing the sponsorship, doing everything that this program asks of you, right? So now my second question is for people that have sobriety, that are, say, 2 years sober. I'm going to say for you, like, you've compressed a lot of recovery in this little cylinder of what we call your recovery, and I think people can really compress a lot of like valuable recovery in a short time if they're really digging in, and that's what I see in you. So your message to people that think they got it at like a year or 2 or 3 years, what's your message for them to stay sustainable in recovery? Like, is it inventory? Is it like service, or what is it?
I think it comes down to honesty, like self-honesty, like being truly honest with yourself. So having had sobriety without recovery and having had recovery now and really truly experiencing the differences, if there's somebody out there that's got some sobriety, some clean time, and maybe they're not truly in the recovery, my question to them is this: have the promises come true? Are the promises true today? Because for me, they 100% are, and I thought it was a joke at first too. But if I have 2 years of fucking clean time and I can't honestly say that I'm living in the step 10 promises, that I'm placed in this position of neutrality, if I'm going to meetings and I'm fucking using them as a dumping ground to be like, oh my God, my dog's sick and I got a flat tire today and my boss was being a jerk to me and I got all these fucking problems that they're mounting up, but I'm sober. Well, is that all I aspire to? Is sobriety? Like, or do I aspire to level the fuck up and find some recovery in this that makes those little problems relative to the problem? They are insignificant. They will pass. I'm not going to get caught up on that shit. But if I'm not actually living in that step 10 promises are really my metric for where my recovery is at. If I can truly experience those, then I think I'm doing something right. And my experience has shown me that is the case. So if I'm fucking 10, 20 years sober, but I'm coming into meetings and I'm fucking dumping shit and I'm not working with other people and I'm relying on the fact that like meeting makers make it and put the plug in the jug and doing all this shit and I've done the steps off the wall. Why is that good enough for me this far into sobriety? Why would I not want more from this? Why would I not listen to the people that are actually in that position of neutrality, the people that have ceased fighting anything or anyone, that do not avoid temptation? Like, what a powerful fucking place that is, that I can go into any place on this earth that a free man can go and not be tempted by drugs and alcohol. That is the freedom that comes from the work that I have done up to this point. So yeah, my recovery may not be long in time, but it is fucking massive in rewards. And it's a zero-sum game for me in recovery. If I'm getting these rewards, I need to be giving back as much, right? And if I am not getting the rewards, I'm probably not giving as much, right? Because that's how I keep self in check. So it's like, if, anybody that's got time that really is struggling or, they're sitting in the shit. Yeah, life's going to happen and there's going to be times that are tough. But where do I live? Like, do I live in those problems? Do I live in that shit that messes me up? Or am I free from that for the most part? And I have experiences where things get a little bit shitty and I can pull myself out of it. Or this is the other thing too. What do I do when things are good? I had to go through some experiences recently to, you see it on the walls and you hear it in the meetings where it's like, this too shall pass, this too shall pass. And people use that as a crutch to get through the shitty times. But what about the good times? Because those too will pass. And am I okay with that? Or do I have to have things good all the time? Because if I have to have things good all the time, eventually I'm going to need a chemical to keep that, to maintain that. Eventually, I won't be able to just do that by myself because life happens and it does get shitty. But if my expectation is that I have to be good all the time and I can't go into these moments where things get a little bit rough and I sit in that and I'm comfortable in there because I grow, well, then I'm fucked. Like I'm on banana peel fucking trail and I'm going to relapse at some point. First, I'm going to emotionally and mentally relapse. That's where those defects start coming back and I start living in them. And then after a long enough time living in that, I'm fucked. I'm going to reach for the substances because it's the only thing that I ever knew prior to this, right? So my metric for measuring where my recovery is at is read the fucking step 10 promises. If that's true in my life today, then I'm doing something right. I don't need to complicate it with anything more than that. If it's not true, do something. Reach out, talk to some fucking people that are living in those step 10 promises and say, hey, this isn't going well for me today. Yes, I'm sober, but that's the lowest level of my recovery, is just to be abstinent from drugs and alcohol. If I'm not getting the fucking rewards that I was promised from doing the work, maybe I'm not doing the work, right? And if that's the case, well, then fucking dig in.
And for you listeners out there, great metric, that's those step 10 promises. Another great metric that I like to mention, now that he's mentioned those ones, is the step 0 promises on page 52. You know, you compare your life based on those promises, you'll know where you're at on an emotionally balanced or unbalanced level. And if we're not emotionally balanced, you know, it won't be long, just like Tyler alluded to, that we will be off balance with the substance again. And it might take 6 months, a year, or 2 years. But eventually that is the result. I'd just like to finish with this. Never was I to pray for myself, except how my usefulness bore on my request to others. Only then may I expect to receive. And that would be in great measure. And the experience that I hear from you, Tyler, today is, you know, you're experiencing these things, these other things that are deep inside in great measure. And I just really want to thank you today for coming and sharing your passion. And I can hear it and I can feel it. And I know you're going to be this amazing, you know, spearhead for God for years and years to come. And you know that you can't let off on this action. So I really want to give you a big hi, a big thank you, and a big heartfelt, I love you, bro. And thank you for coming today.
Thank you again for having me, man. It's such a fucking honor. I absolutely love it. I love what you're doing. I want to be a part of it in any way. And again, not because I have to. I don't have to be here today. I don't have to do shit today other than what I choose to do. I choose to do this today because it's one of the greatest rewards I've received in recovery, is being able to help other people. So keep fucking doing what you're doing, man. We need it.
Thanks, brother. Thank you for tuning in to the UDRcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. The viewpoints and the opinions expressed today were solely of the individual sharing them. If you resonated with this episode, please follow us and share this link with anyone that may benefit from it. Please visit us at BILLWARD.life to see everything that we have going on. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.